Hi, welcome to IntriHealth. My name is Angelo, and in this video, I'll be providing a general overview of Ramsoft, our teleradiology solution designed to help clinics and hospitals manage medical imaging more efficiently. I'll take you through some of the key features and benefits to give you a better understanding of just how the platform works in general. First, let's take a look at the general worklist. When a user or radiographer logs into the system, the first page that appears is the general worklist, which is what we're seeing now. By default, the general worklist shows studies from the last 7 days, though this is customizable. The worklist is also status-driven, meaning that the studies progress from one status to the next until it reaches its final destination, being signed. For example, when a radiographer performs an X-ray, complete with images and patient information, they send that study into our system. The study first appears under the status In Progress, as with this study for John Doe. The In Progress status indicates that the system is still receiving the study. Once all images have been received, it will then automatically move from the In Progress status to the Completed status. When a study reaches the completed status, it needs to be manually moved to the next status. Essentially, it waits in the completed status for the radiographer to verify that all of the patient and study information is correct before sending it to the radiologist for a report. After confirming all of this information, the radiographer can then manually move that study to the RADS worklist. Once the radiologist accesses the study and creates a diagnostic report, the status then automatically changes from RADS worklist to Signed. Signed meaning that a report has been completed and attached into the study. Please also just keep in mind that when a study does move from one status to the next, it is actually removed from its current status and placed into the next status. These studies that I'm showing here are remaining static simply for demonstration purposes. Now, I did mention before that the worklist only holds the last 7 days worth of studies. If you need to look for a study that is older than 7 days, you would need to use the search function located here next to the worklist tab. Inside the search tab, you'll be able to search for any study that you might be looking for using certain criteria such as the patient's last name, first name, ID number, etc. You could even search for a study based on a certain date range, bringing up only studies that fit within that date range. Once you have entered in all the criteria that you need to, you can click on the search button, this magnifying glass icon, to bring up all the results that match the criteria that you've entered in over here. For example, I've entered in the first name John and the last name Doe. Once I click on the search button, it will bring up all the results in the entire system where the first name is John and the last name is Doe. This worklist, the search worklist, functions in exactly the same way as the general worklist functions, meaning that I would be able to access any study from this worklist and adjust any settings as needed. Now that these studies have all been expanded, you'll notice that each data element is located within a column structure, meaning that the patient name appears within the data column. The date and time appears within the date and time column. The IDs all appear under the patient ID column, etc. These columns are all customizable in that they can be moved around if you would prefer to have the data in a different location. And this works in exactly the same way for the general worklist, where you can click and hold and drag a certain column heading and move it to a different location if you would prefer to have it on a different side of the worklist. And in that way, the worklist can be customized to suit your own workflow. Additionally, the worklist is also customizable in that you can show or hide different types of data from being shown on this worklist. Each of these column headings has been specifically selected to be shown on my worklist. If you click on this little asterisk button located over here on the left-hand side, it will open up a drop-down list of all of the data points that would be available to view in this worklist if you wanted to have them. Each of them that has a check mark on the left of it is what is currently being shown. Each of them that does not have a check mark is what is currently being hidden from my worklist. If you would like to add one of these data points to your worklist, you would simply need to locate the one you want, click on the checkbox to the left of its name. It will then be added to your worklist. You'll see that we added the birth date over here. We can then move it to whichever location we would prefer. And if you have made any changes to the structure of the worklist, always remember to save your settings by clicking on the Save disk located here. Okay, let's take a quick look at the details the radiographer is able to adjust when accessing a patient study. First of all, we'll take a look at the patient information. Once we've opened the patient information window, this will allow the radiographer to adjust or correct certain demographics related specifically to the patient. This information is patient-level information, meaning that any adjustments made here will filter through to any study that the patient has done for their entire history, because it affects things like the patient's ID number, their name, their date of birth, their financial type being medical aid or cash, etc. Additionally, you can add an insurance or medical aid coverage by clicking on the Insurance tab. And down at the bottom, you'll see that there's a space to add insurance information. And in the coverage information window, you will be able to add the patient's medical aid details. Once you've successfully added all of the necessary details, you can then click on the Save button at the bottom to save this medical aid into the patient's profile. Along with the patient information, the radiographer is also able to adjust the study information. If I click on this study information icon, it'll open up the study information for this particular study. This is study level information, meaning that any adjustments or additions made here will affect only this particular study that I am accessing. It does not affect any other study that the patient has done for their history. Most of this information is pulled from the X-ray machine normally, but if there is any other information missing, the radiographer can add it now. Notably, in the center, we see a section for notes. Now, if I expand this option, you'll see that the notes section is divided into 3 separate sections. We have the history section, the clinical notes section, and the comments section. Normally, for our functionality and workflow, we do not use the history section. All information that the radiographer can add, and in fact as much information as the radiographer can add, needs to be added into the clinical notes section. The more information there is here, the more accurate of a report the radiologist can make. The comments section is used for amendment requests. If a radiologist has reported a study and the study has then moved to the signed list, the radiographer is able to send that study back to the radiologist to request an amendment if an amendment might be needed. The reason for the amendment request would need to be added here into this study's comments section. Additionally, we will see another section for insurance coverage. This would allow us to add a medical aid or insurance coverage for this patient if it was not already added in the patient information section. The last 2 sections that we see here are procedure codes and reasons for study. Reasons for study being ICD-10 codes. If you would like to add either a procedure code or an ICD-10 code into this patient's study, you would simply have to click on the Add button located to the right-hand side and begin typing a description under the Description section. So for example, I have typed chest, which will bring up a whole list of codes related to chest. I can then select the correct one that I would like, and that would then add that code into the study. If I've added the incorrect code, or I don't want to add this code, I can simply click on the Remove button. It works exactly the same way for the ICD-10 code section. The last section to view here would be the Assigned Personnel. Here, the radiographer would be able to assign all kinds of different personnel into the study, allowing them access to the study. Firstly, the referring physician should be assigned into the study. Any other third-party clinicians or physicians can then be added into this Consulting Physician section at the bottom. The reading physician would be the radiologist who did the report. Their name would automatically be added here. And the performing physician would be the name of the radiographer who performed this exam. Another thing that the radiographer should attend to is to attach a referral note into the study itself. You'll note that this document icon has a different color code to symbolize different meanings. If the document is white, it means that there is currently no document attached into the study at all. If the document icon is blue, it means that there is a document attached into the study of some kind, likely a referral note. And if the document icon is green, it means that there is a report already attached into that study. Simply clicking on this icon will take you to the document section for that study. So now, if I click on this icon, it will open up the documents portion of this study. I can immediately see that there are no reports. There is one prior report, which is this blank document that I've loaded, and there are no other documents attached into this study. I would simply need to click on the Document Importer icon to open up the Document Importing tool, where I can select the type of document that I'm trying to import and choose from one of two different locations from where I can import the document from. The folder icon will allow me to import a document that has already been scanned or is sitting somewhere on my computer already. The other icon, the scan icon, will allow me to directly scan a document from the scanner and import it into this window, where I can then save it into this patient's file. Once I've saved the imported document, it will permanently be attached into this patient's file. One of the final things that the radiographer can do before sending the study to the radiologist would be to open up the study and view the images, just to make sure that all of the images have been received successfully before they send the study to the radiologist. To do that, you would simply have to double-click on the study to open up the diagnostic viewer. The viewer is divided into a few different sections. First of all, you'll see the main viewing window, whereby you can view the actual images for the study in a larger format. The layout icon at the top will allow you to choose how many images you'd like to see at the same time. Anything from 1 up to however many images you would like to view. Currently, these spaces are blank because there are no images to show here. The bottom portion of this window is called the Patient Explorer. In this portion of the Patient Explorer, you would be able to see a list of all of the prior studies for this patient linked together by their ID number. So the radiologist would be able to view any image from any prior study simply by clicking on the image and dragging it up into the main viewing window. They can then be compared side by side. In this bottom section, on the left-hand side, you will see the current clinical notes and comments that the radiographer has added into the study. Additionally, on the left-hand side and at the top, we have a myriad of different tools that will allow you to manipulate the images if needed. Things like changing the contrast, zooming in, pan and scan, and there are also a number of measurement tools that you can make use of as well. You have an icon over here, the document icon, that will allow you to access the document portion of this study, as we've seen previously. Additionally, we have the printing button, which will allow you to print images either on paper or onto DICOM film with a DICOM printer. And if the radiographer is now happy with all of the images that have come through, they can then push the study forward onto the RADS worklist so that the radiologist would then be able to access it. They would simply have to click on this icon, labeled as Finish Reviewing Study. Once I click on this icon, it will automatically close the diagnostic viewer, go back to the main worklist, and you'll see that the study will have been pushed onto the RADS worklist. You'll see that the study that I was working on, which was currently in the completed status, has now been pushed onto the RADS worklist status. The radiologist can now access this study, create a diagnostic report for it, and once he has done so, it will then be pushed onto the signed worklist. Once the radiologist has accessed the study and created a report, you would then be able to view the report by clicking on the document icon shown here. This would open up the documents portion of the study, allowing us to view the newly created report. In this case, I've uploaded a blank one. You could then either decide to print the report onto your Windows printer or download the report in PDF format if needed. If you would instead prefer to email the report, you could instead right-click on the study, go to Send To, and choose Email New Recipient. You could then enter the details of the recipient, the last name, the first name, and especially the email address, and click on Send. The recipient would then receive a copy of their report. However, please note that this does not send the images or a link to the images. This only sends the report as an email attachment. Also, please note that any referring physician or third-party clinician that has already been attached into the study will automatically be emailed a copy of the report to their email address. They will also then have access to view the study on the online portal. Another very handy feature to know would be the study audit log, which basically keeps an audit trail of any changes made to a study throughout its entire history. By simply right-clicking on the study, going to audit log and then study audit log, you would be able to see a historical record of any changes or adjustments that have been made to the study throughout its entire history. From this window, you'd be able to see what time the study was accessed, what user accessed the study, what status the study was on when it was accessed, and what action was taken inside the study. This way, you would be able to track what user has changed what detail if the issue should arise at some point. We do also have the option to run a DICOM modality worklist. Now, to explain this in the most simplest terms, the way that I've explained before would be whereby the radiographer takes the patient details and enters them directly into the X-ray machine. They then take the images and send that study into our system, where we start to receive the study as an in-progress status study. Now, there is a potential problem with this in that the radiographer has to continuously re-enter the patient's details every time that patient comes in for an X-ray. And very often what does happen is that the radiographer will enter in the details incorrectly by accident. For example, they may add an additional letter to the surname when they send that study in. What will then happen is the system will say, we already have a patient with this ID and this name spelling. We've now received a patient with the same ID, however the name is spelled different. This would then create a conflict of data that would need to be manually resolved. Essentially, we would have to select which set of patient details is the correct one. Over time, this does cause inefficiency. Instead of using that basic method, we can instead use a method called the DICOM modality worklist. Essentially, what will happen is that the patient details, instead of being entered into the X-ray machine directly, would instead be entered into our system. So either a new patient record could be created on our system, or if there already is a patient record, the radiographer would then have to simply select the patient record that they want to start a study for, create a new study for them. This would then be sent into the X-ray machine. But because the patient details have already been entered into our system, there is no conflict of data because there is no incorrect spelling or mistake that happens there. So for example, if I go to patient search and I look for the patient that I created for our test, which would be John Doe, and then I search for this patient, the record of John Doe will pop up on the system. His details already exist. I don't need to add any of them. I would simply need to select him from the list and click on the button that would allow me to create a new study for him. Opening up the study info window, being blank, I can enter in all of the required details, save those details, and then send that study into the X-ray machine. The X-ray machine would then pick up the details. The radiographer would then basically just select that patient displaying on the X-ray machine, perform the X-ray to take the images, and send that study back into our system. This would avoid the conflicting data issue. So, heading back to our worklist, we can create a custom workflow that would suit this DICOM modality worklist system. Let's say, for example, I had created the top study as a brand new study for the patient that had planned on coming in for an X-ray today. I've created the study under the status scheduled, which I've already changed. Once the patient arrives at the X-ray department, I can then change that status to arrived, meaning that the patient has arrived at the building. Once the radiographer plans on taking the patient to the X-ray room, I can then change that status to started, and we can set a custom trigger to send the study to the X-ray machine only once the study has arrived on the started status. The radiographer can then pick up the study on the X-ray machine, perform the exam as normal, and once the study starts receiving images, it would then automatically change into the in-progress status and follow from there onwards as normal, completely and utterly avoiding the conflict of data issue. And the last thing that I would like to show you is the platform that we use for our referring doctors and GPs called Rapid Results. This platform is very lightweight, very user-friendly, and all works within the browser so that the referring GPs and doctors don't have to install anything or follow any complicated instructions at all. You'd simply click on the Rapid Results button. This opens up the Rapid Results platform. I would have to go to Search, and then search for the patient that I'm looking for. Remember that a referring physician can only search for studies that they have been attached into. They cannot search for any study in which they have not already been added. So now I would simply look for my patient, click on the search button, and here are my same 4 studies from the previous system. I would then simply need to double click on the study. I can then view the images for my patient, as well as viewing the reports that were created for them. Very lightweight, very simple, very handy. Thank you very much for sticking with us through this video. I hope this information was very informative. If you do have any questions, please reach out to us at support@entryhealth.com, and one of our agents will be more than happy to assist you with any questions you may have. Thank you.